Hello everybody and welcome back to RP-1. So we are just going to take a short episode today and work on a singular launch. I did some pretty good stuff with this launch, and it will be the capstone launch, as you can see here, the Polar Orbit satellite for the early satellites program. The reason why it's such a short episode is I am really struggling with those two contracts, the hypersonic and the stratospheric, so we're going to need to spend our science that we have 14.7 of. And the smartest thing to do is put it into high-speed flight. However, I'm going to look at a couple different options. The high-speed flight is what is going to help us push forward towards hypersonic, or supersonic, excuse me. However, I've also been struggling to get my probes back from orbit, and I'm really tempted on spending some money on this, some science on these heat shields. However, it's pretty expensive, and it says that their heat shields are rated for humans, and I feel like wasting all that science on something that I may not even make as much use out of until later might be a poor decision. So we are going to spend the money on high-speed flight, which is going to give us upgrades to our existing engines as well as new engines for us to play around with. But like I mentioned before, it is, in recording of this episode, it took quite a bit of effort to work on the X-Plane programs, and I still haven't exactly perfected my design, and so I'd like a little bit more time to spend on that. So I decided rather than not producing a full episode, I would just bring you a short singular launch one. So I hope you enjoy this, and yeah, we're just going to hop right on in the VAB. So we're going to use the Goldbird Psi satellite that we had already created in a previous episode. However, this looks a little different because I was experimenting with, like I mentioned before, trying to return the probe from orbit, and very unsuccessfully I spent some money trying to, spent some science trying to go down the solid rocket boosters phase, but eventually canceled that research. So we had parts that were locked, so we couldn't launch that even if we wanted to. But nonetheless, we don't need to return this. We are going to do an early TV camera on our probe. Given the fact that it is going to be in a polar orbit, that means that it will go over every single biome and collect all the science very passively as we go along. It's not a lot of science to be gotten in each biome, but you know what? It's more than we have, so we can't complain. We're going to put some solar panels on here to keep it alive as long as possible. After a successful test, we were able to perfect our flight with it, and so I'm pretty comfortable that this will have enough. It's got 1300 meters per second delta V, and if I remember correctly, I think it's like somewhere to the tune of like 10,000 or 11,000 that you need in order to get to orbit, with a couple extra hundred delta V added on it when you're trying to get into a polar orbit. So pretty confident that our tests will prove fruitful with the reality of the flight. So I took the contract for the polar orbit. One of the notable features that sets it aside from the polar orbit of the light satellites program is you need to have a satellite of 1,000 kilograms, which is indeed pretty heavy. And it's actually pretty easy for us because our top stage is enough to get to orbit, and our top stage is quite heavy, easily enough to satisfy. But if we did need to rely on that SRB in order to finalize our orbit, there's a chance that it wouldn't be heavy enough, and so we'd have to make our probe core heavier, which leads to the tyranny of the rocket equation. So I'm pretty happy that we took the heavy satellites program. I've been liking this one a lot more than the light satellites program. We could do the light satellites program a lot faster, but this one is just more satisfying. Anyways, since we can get that rocket on the launch pad, we're going to hire 100 extra engineers to make it come a little faster, because I want to get that science as soon as possible. And we still have plenty of money, and we are in a positive, so I have no fear with that. But with all that said and done, let's go ahead and hop down onto the launch pad. Early morning flight as per usual. Actually, no, excuse me. This is a midday flight because I wanted to get the most amount of time in the sunlight as possible. However, in hindsight, it would have been better as a midnight flight because then our apoapsis would have been on the sunny side. Nonetheless, this will do nicely. As you can see here, I have MechJeb's ascent guidance up, and I am pleased to say that I have been practicing with it. I have been learning and have been getting a lot more consistent flights through it. However, some of it still kind of escapes me, and no matter how many times I've tried to wrap my head around the coasting stage, I can never seem to get it to work right. So we're going to do a little bit of a hybrid between between MechJeb, Smart ASS, and Advanced Auto Fly-by-Wire. So with the fact that we are now piloted by MechJeb, that gives me a lot more opportunity to take cinematic shots and kind of just watch our flight as a passive observer. I don't have to worry about tipping over too far or in the wrong direction or not at a good enough speed. It just handles for me, so that's very nice. It's another reason why this episode ended up being a little bit shorter than my typical ones, is because I can just kind of focus on the parts that look a little more interesting and cut out the dead space in between, because we have some long burns on this rocket. Our top stage itself is a 7.5 minute burn, so it's quite a while, and I know you can physics warp to save yourself some time and speed up, but I don't know if I'm imagining it or if it was inconsequential, if it was just an error that happened naturally. But I've had times where like my engines failed or the propellant just didn't, I've had issues when physics warping while burning, and so I just I bite the bullet, I wait the 7.5 minutes and just let it go through. So it was kind of nice to be able to do it a little more automatically, a little more cinematically. It allows me to do things like this. So back at our main rocket, we now are just going to burn the rest of the liquid fuel and oxidizer in our RD-108 stage. And then once we get to our target apoapsis, we're going to pitch horizontally, get ourselves in our spin stabilization, and get ready to shift. So I don't know exactly what else to talk about. I feel it was weird taking a back seat and not flying this myself, but we're getting to the stage where we're going to need to have that kind of accuracy and perfection with our launches, because we can't afford to take any chances with our humans, with our missions, and things. The stakes are getting pretty high now, and so I'm excited. This is the farthest I've ever gone. I have been struggling through the game and the programs. Look at that. But I've been having a lot of fun, and so I hope you've been enjoying the process with me. And I hope you're learning something as well. I often say that you can learn a lot from tutorials, but you learn a whole lot more through Let's Plays, because you get to see the successes and the failures of the YouTuber. No matter who it is, every YouTuber will come across a time where it's like, oh, that launch didn't go correctly, or oh, this turned out differently than I would have expected, but hey, we made the best out of it. And those are fun moments, and those are great teaching moments. And so sometimes I feel like if I struggle through something and then find a way to make it work, then it's worth it, because any of you who might be playing along or might be interested in playing along get to learn from those mistakes beforehand, and it'll just set you up to be a better player to begin with. So like I mentioned, long 7.5 minute burn. So just grabbing different little angles as we go along. Very calming. One of the things I've been working on in the X-Plane programs is trying to break the Kármán line, get into space, and then deal with the fiery re-entry. So with the stress that comes from doing one of those missions, it's nice to have a little bit of a calm before the storm. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That'll be in the next episode. And with that little camera shift, we now know that our periapsis is above the negatives, and we will be reaching orbit soon. We're not pointed exactly horizontal, we're a little bit above, but nonetheless, it worked out. And as we can see from our contract, we have every single parameter achieved with the exception of the shakeout time. So we, once this engine stops burning, we could technically just turn the engine off right now, but there's no need. We can get a higher apoapsis. But yeah, all we need to do is let it orbit for the specified amount of time, collect the science, transmit the science, and this will be a successful mission. I was very happy that this came out as well as it did and as easily as it did, because let me tell you, the hours of X-Plane testing and failure upon failure upon failure, and not even really in any interesting failures, just quick explosions because the heating effect was too much and playing around trying to do different things. But we'll be including some of that in the next episode, like I mentioned before. But yeah, the X-Plane, it's kicking my butt. Reaching its final resting point soon. It will be reaching engine cutoff, coming to its final, resting place. Yeah, I don't know what to do with myself on these automated launches. It's weird. It's like when I flew it myself, I could at least talk about the things that I was doing. But I wasn't doing anything. But anyways, we are in orbit. Our contract has been completed. We've got the beautiful Earth below us. We can see the Northern Lights for the very first time, at least in this series. The beautiful graphics of RSS Reborn. If you're interested in how to install this, I made a video detailing the very easy way to get this into your gameplay. But with that said, let's just go ahead and time warp our way around the Earth. Not a lot to see as we're approaching the dark side. Like I mentioned, our apoapsis is mainly in the dark side. However, we do have a high enough, or the angle of our launch was high enough that we do spend quite a bit of that apoapsis in the sunlight. And as we come down here, we see that we actually had a inclination that took us so the sun was never blocked by the Earth, so that's pretty nice. The only time we don't get sun is when our retrograde is facing towards it, but soon out of that, and once again we get charge, and then when we come out of cinematic mode, we get the warning that, hey, we were too high up in space. We need deep space avionics if we're going to have any kind of control or communication with that. So that actually made me really happy, because that is a good sign that we are progressing forward in our gameplay to the point that we now need better avionics. So it is going to be something that I'm going to need to think about with the better communications, better avionics. I don't have access to the deep space ones yet, so we will have to grind some of that science out. But we have 16 points of science, and I would really like to get the 1959 orbital rocketry. We can get access to better engines, not just for our orbital rockets, but even for our X-planes. And right now, power seems to be an issue. So we're going to go ahead and research that now. However, depending on how our test flights go, we may change that around next time. But as we come into the administration building, we see here that we have successfully completed all the contracts necessary for the program. We still have a little bit under a year left to go, so we're actually going to hold off on completing this program, because sometimes it is better to complete it early. You get a much better reputation chunk from it, and then you can use that on better programs, but we have a pretty good reputation chunk right now. So we're going to hold off on this. We're going to gain the rest of the funding, especially since it's flat funding for the rest of the year. And then we will look into starting a new program next time. But if you like this shorter kind of episode where I focus on just one mission at a time, let me know in the comments below. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP-1. If you did, think about subscribing. Drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.